Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Career Transitions with Kerry Hannon. If you're just tuning in, we're going to take down our poll in a minute, so you got another minute to just let us know who you are and who's here. Also, please, in 2 minutes, check your email inboxes. We are going to be sending out a note-taking sheet that Kerry has provided to help you follow along with the webinar, so you'll be able to download that. At the bottom of your screen, just to give you a quick entry or introduction to this webinar, you'll see a couple of controls. The Q&A control is what you will use to submit questions for Kerry, which she'll be answering towards the end of the webinar. The other controls are really not, any other controls you have, you can ignore. We're just going to be using the Q&A and not the chat for questions. Let me look at our poll. Okay, looking at our poll, we had about 80 people answered, and we've got good representation. Well, we've got representation from every school. This is amazing. I think it's the first time we have that, and great representation across the class years. So we're really excited to have all of you here today with us. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kerry Hannon, class of 1982. Kerry is a Duke alumna and a career strategist who focuses on helping people reach their potential and manage career transitions. We're so thankful to have Kerry here today with us for this exclusive benefit for Duke alumni and for the opportunity to engage intentionally about our careers. Kerry?
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. As Susan said, this is Kerry Hannon, and I'm thrilled to be here. This is one of my very favorite topics. I spend a lot of time traveling around the country and speaking to audiences who are trying to do this, trying to make sense of what we're doing with our working lives. And it's such an exciting opportunity to think about career transition and what really might fire you up in order to make a difference in your own life and hopefully impact others. Now, I will say that I work from a home office, so where we're set up today, I can't promise that there's not going to be a dog barking at some point. So bear with me, but it's great to be here. And so that really, what I like to start with when I'm talking to folks who are interested in making a career transition, and listen to this, Gallup recently did a survey that showed that less than a third of workers are engaged in their jobs. You know what that means? That means a lot of people are thinking about, taking this job and shove it and trying to find something that really, has meaning to them. But in order to get started on a career transition, this is a process, okay? Career transition is not something that just happens overnight. It takes time. And I often tell people to consider, give yourself a nice flexible time frame, 3 to 5 years even, if you can do that. But in order to get started on that first movement to considering what you want to do, it's Kerry's fitness plan. I really think this is critical. And I have, particularly, there's 3 parts to my plan. It's physical fitness, it's financial fitness, and it's spiritual fitness. All right, so let me walk you through these. The first one is physical fitness, okay? I have so many, and I will say it's often women, but will come up to me, and it's usually if at a certain age range, but say, should I get Botox? Should I dye my hair? And I'm like, oh my gosh, not necessarily if you really want to, but what you really need to do is to get physically fit, because you know what? Whatever you're doing, whatever transition, whether you're looking for a new employer or whether you're starting off on a whole new adventure, you need to be physically fit, because what that does, and I don't mean running fast miles or bench pressing or what have you. It's simply, I walk my dog, but find something that you can do, whether it's swimming or walking, something to do a couple times a week. And when you're physically fit, you have this energy, this vibe, this can-do spirit. The people want to be around you. They want to work with you. They can't really identify what it is exactly, but you have this positivity about you. And I think it's critical when you're making a career transition to have that energy that comes from being physically fit. Number 2, financial fitness. If you're going to make a career transition, trust me, you're probably going to have to start off at a salary less than you're currently making, at least initially. Or if you're heading off to start your own adventure, your own business, chances are you might not be able to pay yourself initially, or, maybe even for the first year or so as you reinvest in your business. So it's critical that you get financially fit, because here's the thing, debt is the biggest dream killer. It is truly, whenever I talk to people who are doing career transitions, money is the biggest stumbling block. So if you can get financially fit, and what I mean here is do a budget. Where can you, trim back? Where can you get lean and mean? Maybe it's downsizing your living situation. It's paying off credit card debts. Whatever you might have sort of lingering over your head that really gets you trapped in earning a certain salary and so forth, it can really free you. I find when you're financially fit, it's so empowering because you're nimble, you have choices. You can make some really interesting decisions about what you want to do with your working life because you're not trapped by having to earn a certain salary. The third piece of Kerry's fitness program is spiritual fitness. And I'm not talking about woo-woo religion and all of that, nothing wrong with it, but what this is all about is having a ballast in our lives. Because when you're making a career transition, here's the thing, you lose your sense of identity. People often mourn their old job. They go into this grieving process because they're kind of a greenhorn again. And it's no longer someone coming to you and asking for advice, but you're going to others and having to ask advice. So I think it's really important. And it's also extremely stressful, right? You're going through a lot of change, and change is stressful. So when you have a spiritual fitness, and by this I mean yoga, meditation, Tai Chi. I like to walk my dog in a quiet, country roads, but whatever it is where you can kind of go to find that ballast, really, I encourage you to look into that area. The second thing to think about is really, I call this soul searching. I mean, what is really motivating you to make a career change? Are you burned out? You're not getting promoted anymore. You're no longer, the hot shot in your workplace. Or more importantly, and this is what I find a lot when I've talked to people who have made career transitions and made these decisions about their lives, that they don't want to do this anymore. They want to do this. And this is what I found. A lot of them they've had a death of someone close to them. They've lost someone they love. And they've kind of had this realization that life is, we hear this again and again, but it really hits home that this is it, and so we really need to take advantage and be doing work that's meaningful. The second thing in this lineup of loss is often fear, like you've had a health crisis of your own. Maybe it's a cancer diagnosis that you work through or what have you, but if you've had a health scare of your own, again, that's a bit of a wake-up call that say, I'm getting up every morning to do something. I want to be doing something that I truly love. Or it could be a life event. When I wrote my book, What's Next? I spent about 3 years traveling around the country, meeting people who had made big career transitions. And it was fantastic. And I will say that many of them at that time had been shocked and sort of altered by 9/11. And it made them say, whoa, I really need to think about what I'm doing with my life. So those are some of the main things. And finally, and this is happening, it depends on your age range, but if you're over 50, which is often the age, that soul searching about what it is that's motivating you to change. And then, okay, how are you going to make this change? So it's important to realize what your skills are. A lot of us take our skills for granted because we've been doing them for so long. So what are your top skills? Take the time, write a journal, write these things down, ask people around you. You may have skills that you don't even realize, but those close to you can say, you're really good at this, you're great at communicating or whatever it might be. Think about, do that real deep dive into what your top skills are and think about how they can transfer to a new field. So many folks get caught up at this idea like, oh, I'm reinventing myself. And it's really daunting. And oh my gosh, you're not reinventing yourself. You are redeploying your skills from this field to that field. So it's really just a shift. Think about, and when you think about it that way, it becomes a lot easier to embrace this idea of career transition. So really take that time and really evaluate your skills. And then it's thinking about, okay, so what is it I really want to do? I mean, this is my time. What can I do that's really going to mean something? And so think about what your dream job is. And often it harkens back to maybe something you loved as a child. So don't be afraid to, I encourage journaling in this regard as well. Write down the things that when you were happiest at in your job, what is it that really made you shine? Is there a cause or a social mission that motivates you? Is there a hobby that might be a launching pad for something you want to do? And so, and some people want to be their own boss, but let me tell you about a couple of dookies that I know who did these amazing career transitions that I've spent time with. And the first one, and this maybe will just get you thinking about the possibilities, is Don Covington. All right. Now, Don was career military. And he was a Navy captain and so forth. And they have mandatory retirement. And so when Don was thinking about what it is he wanted to do in his career transition, he wasn't ready to retire. Don absolutely loved the circus as a kid. And when he grew up in Baltimore, and he remembers going to the circus with his dad, and he absolutely loved it. And everywhere that he was deployed with the Navy, he would find a circus, and he would go to the circus. And he actually got magazines that were for the circus industry. So when Don took his mandatory retirement, Don ran away with the circus. I'm not kidding. I'm like, Don, what does the circus have to do with the military? And he says, Kerry, really, they're not that different. And I understood what he meant by that his leadership skills and his management skills, all those things he had honed in his Navy career, he was able to shift to. He became the company manager of the Big Apple Circus, moving a troupe of circus performers up and down the East Coast. And his wife was a nurse. She became the wardrobe designer. It was fantastic. Another Dookie that I like to talk about is Deborah Langsom. And she graduated from Duke, and she became a botany professor, a biology professor at UNC Chapel Hill. And she just found that she was just over it. She was really burned out. And she and her husband, who was a pediatrician, they loved cooking, and they loved doing all sorts of pastries and things. And so on their vacations, they had taken cooking classes and done things like that as they went off on vacations and did stuff. And they slowly began making chocolates and things for their friends and so forth. Well, they ended up starting a chocolate company called Barking Dog Chocolates. And so it was an interesting transition, but they did it slowly. Another Dookie is Betsy Worley, and Betsy was amazing. She's a lawyer, and she was at Morgan Stanley. She wanted to, she really felt strongly about women's issues, and she moved to the nonprofit sector, working initially as the executive director of the Transition Network, which is aimed at women over 50 making transitions. And now she's with Encore.org. But Betsy, again, she really, she made this big career switch, but she did it in stages. So those are just a couple. And the most recent Duke career transition story, I wear these shoes. I don't know if any of you have discovered these Rothy's, which I absolutely love. They're made from recycled plastic, recycled bottles. And the Rothy's co-founder is a Duke grad. He graduated with a BA in '92. So at any rate, those are just a couple of fun stories that maybe get you thinking about what some Dookies have done here. But again, as I mentioned here, it's no rash moves. The people who have succeeded in making career transitions, who I've spent time with, this is essential. It is something they planned for. They took their time. They researched the kind of work they wanted to do. They reached out to people in their network to find out, how they got to do those jobs, what it entailed, to really get a sense of, what was available, what was out there, where the jobs were, who was hiring if you were going to work for another company. And they took the time to add the necessary skills that they needed to make that transition. This is a big one because it can take time. And I'm not saying you need to go back and get a master's degree or any of that sort of thing. It's simply start with one class to make sure that this is an area that you're really interested in. And there's lots of great ways to upgrade your skills in education. There's ways to do it online. There's ways to do it in certificate programs, community colleges. Also, Duke obviously offers some programs you might be able to tap into. But it's really, what do you absolutely need to do? You don't want to overspend in this area. So take your time, but you need to upgrade those skills ahead of time. So reach out to all those industry and alumni networks you have to see what might be out there. And frankly, it's really an important thing to go slow. And I think in order to really achieve the kind of success you want to do, you want to have that flexible time frame. And truthfully, I'd like to, everyone, it's the buzzword is networking, but really networking is just one letter away from not working. So this is your time to really go, where's your network? Look on LinkedIn. Who do you know that went to Duke with you, that works at a company that maybe is a company that you'd really like to target, that you'd like to work for and shift into a new arena using your skills and maybe your updated skills. But again, you want to be very, really take your time to do this and mine your networks. Now, I want to make one stop when I'm talking about upgrading your education and skills. This is another part where that financial fitness can come in, because you may have to spend a little bit here to upgrade your skills. Look around you. If you're still working, perhaps you can get, your employer provided tuition there. If it's somehow fits into what you're currently doing, you might be able to do this. But again, start looking ahead of time. Some companies, now this is a terrific example. IBM has a transition to teaching program. So they chip in about $15,000 to help employees who want to shift into teaching. And again, you do it very slowly. There's a gentleman I know here in the Washington, D.C. area that he teaches in Poolesville, Maryland now. And he was an IT specialist at IBM. And he gradually went back and added the courses one at a time until he was ready. And he did it, I think, over a period of about 3 years. And now he's teaching, and he absolutely, absolutely loves it. So again, that's a really important thing to consider. And this is one of my favorite slides. You have to listen. When you're reaching out to that network, when you're doing your career transition exploration, listen, listen, listen. This is my dog, Zena, by the way. She's really fantastic. And she listens to me all the time, just like that. And I love her. And that's the thing is, I recently interviewed this fabulous guy right there at Duke, Steve Dalton, who's the program director for daytime career services at the Fuqua School. And he has this book called The 2-Hour Job Search. So pick it up if you don't already have it or know about it. But what Steve was talking to me about, which I think is such a great thing to be reminded of, is that you need to reach out and have these conversations with people about work opportunities and job opportunities that you're curious about. And you're not asking them for a job, but what you're asking is for them to teach you something. You want to learn something about that kind of work. And there's this temptation, as Steve told me, and I know this firsthand, when you're in that kind of situation, that you're trying to sell yourself. You're dancing as fast as you can and trying to tell everybody how great you are. But this is not that time. When you're doing this homework for making your career transition and you're reaching out to your network to find out about opportunities that might work for you, this is your time to listen and to turn off that desire. And we love our dogs, like I love Zena, because she actually, I'm 100% her focus. And if you're 100% focused on somebody when you're meeting with them, they're going to come away with a really positive vibe about you, and they're going to want to be one of your supporters. They're going to want to help you find your career transition. So I think this is something that often we forget when we're trying to move quickly or to transition to something new, is that this is our time to soak it all up, to learn what's out there and what other people are doing. And so this is an important attribute to really work on. Now, here's an important thing. Every single person that I spoke to who made a successful career transition, and I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people and helped with their strategies, is they did the job first. So often it sounds like something's going to be really dreamy and it's what you've always wanted to do. But when you actually are in that job, it is not such a great fit for you. So if possible, you want to moonlight, you want to apprentice, can you volunteer or do a fellowship, an internship? These are all things that are possibilities out there, but I find it's really an important step in this process of making a career transition. For example, this is sometimes career transitions come up on us when we don't plan for them. And there's a woman, Ann Nolan, who I met, who she had been downsized from her corporate job, and she had an executive position. And she had about a year's severance payment. And so Ann was trying to figure out what it is she wanted to do. And she, would walk, she was in Providence, Rhode Island, and she would walk her dog along the river and try to think about what it was. And she started volunteering at a homeless shelter in Providence. And then she was asked to be on the board because of her executive skills and her background. And so she was a member of the board, and they needed a new CEO. And within not too much time, Anne rose to that position. She was, they interviewed her for it. She loved the idea. And she said, never in my life would have I dreamed that I would be, I would be doing this kind of work. And she said, I cry every day, but it's for the right reasons. And so it was an unexpected career transition that she made, but it came through a volunteer opportunity. So if you're making a career transition, perhaps because you have been, stepped out of a job because of a downsizing or what have you, this is the time to I tell people, get out of your head and into the world, go and volunteer. You never know. And for a cause that you care about, something that is meaning to you, you never know whether something might, percolate up right there that could be a great fit for you. But it may also, it's that opportunity once again to network and talk to people and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. And they may know somebody and they may know somebody. So that network just goes out in concentric circles. And so you just never know where something may come to you. So I think, those are really important things to remember. And when I mentioned Debbie Langsam, they moonlighted. They made chocolates for restaurants in the Charlotte area. They tried different things before they actually, launched their business. And a gentleman I know who was with Merrill Lynch, and he really loved his work there. He's in New York, and this, dates back a little bit. But during 9/11, Tim, lost some friends and colleagues, and he was fortunate that certainly he was a survivor. But he took the time, and he and his wife he decided he didn't want to raise his family. He and his wife together made this decision in the New York area. They wanted to move back to Pittsburgh, where he grew up, and he wanted to be able to spend time with his kids, softball games and basketball games and so forth. And he and his wife, Colleen, had always fancied themselves gourmet chefs, and they had a gourmet cooking club and so forth. But when they sat down together and said, okay, we want to make a transition, what's it going to be? Tim said, hey, I'm going to try the restaurant business. I'd really love to see it. But he didn't just go back to Pittsburgh and launch a restaurant. He did every red sauce job he could find. He was, he bussed tables, and he worked as a short order cook, and he worked, as a greeter, and anything you can do in the restaurant business. He volunteered, or he took short-term jobs in order to learn every piece of it. And he said, you know what, I think I can do this. And then Colleen ended up being his wife. She worked with him. The kids ended up having jobs at the restaurant, and they started this wonderful Italian restaurant in Pittsburgh that became a real family affair. And it was a terrific adjustment for him. So I think that's, it's something to keep in mind when you're thinking of a transition. One avenue, there are some great fellowships out there. Encore.org is a group that I'm a big fan of. They have Encore fellowships. You might, check out their website to see what is there if you're interested in the nonprofit arena. And it really is a nice way to sort of get your toes wet and see if that's an interesting area to transition. I also encourage people, if you're still grappling with, and again, I'm going to say it again, it's a process career transition. Give yourself time in order to make this a successful transition, because it does really take some time. And a great opportunity that can work in your favor is to start a career transition group. And, there are other like-minded people around you in your community that are probably thinking, and in fact, you might not even have to be in real time and be able to sit down together. Maybe you even do it virtually. But if you have a group of people who are going through a similar situation where they're grasping and grappling and brainstorming about what it is they really want to transition to, it's really wonderful to have that energy of people around you who are there to support you, to keep you accountable. And they're, it's just there. You're safe in that space, because trust me, your family gets really tired of hearing about your career transitions. You want them on your board, on your side. You need their support. But frankly, this is your journey. So if you can find other people that can come together with you and you talk about, what the different issues are, the money issues or the networking and so forth. So really take that time. And it's very critical along those lines is to find a mentor, to find, I call it a Sherpa, but whatever it is for you, someone who's kind of done this before, someone who's been through a career transition, or someone who is working in the field where you want to go to, or has a business similar to what you're interested in and starting a business in that arena. Talk to them and see if you can just, can you tag along? Can you, sort of just find out what it is, spend time and build that trust with somebody who can really guide you, because again, it's very stressful. It can be, and I don't mean that in a negative way, because change is so energizing and so positive for us. But if you can find a mentor to sort of guide you along this path, I think you're going to love it. And one service, and I have no affiliation with them besides the fact that I actually like the guy a lot who founded it, Brian Kurth, and I find this service kind of useful, is pivotplanet.com. And he can connect you virtually, or if they're in your community, with an expert advisor. So if you're interested in moving into a certain area, they can help you. And I mean, I used it myself when I was trying to build out my speaking platform. I started my own business 15 years or so ago. And I wanted, in recent years, I wanted to really beef up speaking. And so I found an expert to really coach there that I could work with right there on the platform to help me sort of figure out how to do that and how to value myself and those sorts of things. So, again, there are other places. I think alumni groups, obviously Duke is terrific at this, your alumni group in your area, industry associations, colleagues you've worked with other places. Reach out to people and really see what it is that that they can do to sort of give you that support, give you that direction, help you start in baby steps. So again, you're going to find it really, really useful if you have somebody in your corner. And one approach that I like, obviously I have Kerry's fitness plan, which I'm a firm believer in, but hovering is another sort of acronym I use a lot when I talk to people about making career transitions and career changes. And there are 5 core ingredients. And so hope is sort of the one piece of it. And hope is, if you don't have hope, you're never going to get started on anything. So it's really a sort of this inner sense that there are possibilities out there for you. And optimism is the O. So when you're optimistic, you're not afraid to fail. You're not afraid to take risks. You're willing to try something new. And that will really, really build into your character a way to move forward. When you value yourself, for the V, this is something that's a little hard for people to understand, in the sense that you're moving into a new field, you're moving into a new arena. How do you really, show that you're worth what it is? And it's really, the sense of value is a little deeper here. What I'm talking about here is valuing who you are and what you bring to the party. And so the best way to really constantly be feeding this sense of value and confidence in yourself is to be learning something new. And, whether it's a friend of mine, she was making a career transition. She was thinking about what she wanted to do. She hit the pause button. And trust me, it might not be what fits for you, but she took a class in jewelry making. Now, it had nothing to do with what she ultimately was going to end up doing. But that experience of sort of working on a whole different part of her brain, it sort of juiced up all the creativity and made her start thinking about different ways of looking at her work and her work life. And so so it might be learning in terms of what fits for your career, but it could be learning just in a whole other platform, but that helps you add value to yourself. And enthusiasm, when you're enthusiastic, trust me, people want to be around you. They want you to be on their team. They want to work with you. So whether you're making a transition to a new arena, that energy, that enthusiasm that you bring to a project is what's going to say people welcome you in and say, hey, you know, I want to guide you along this route. Let's see what we can do here. So it's sort of that intangible oomph factor, you know, that provides the energy that you really need to make this career transition. And resilience is one of those words that it's so buzzy. You know, everyone's, oh, you've got to get resilient. Well, what the heck is resilience? Resilience is just the ability to really deal with setbacks. And when you're making a career transition, it's not necessarily going to be a smooth transition. So you want to be able to, you know, be able to get back up again, to keep moving forward, to look to the new opportunity, to reach out to that next person, to make that one more phone call that you didn't want to make. So resilience builds into that whole sense of the hover approach. So I think, you know, those are the things that kind of I build into it, to a program when I'm thinking about what I want to do, when I'm thinking about a career transition. But you know, there's so many great stories of people who make these transitions, and truthfully, and I want to be perfectly blunt with everyone, it's not everyone is hardwired to make these big, you know, major life transitions. So, you know, you do it in small ways. As I talked about at the beginning of our webinar here, is that you're redeploying skills. You're not reinventing yourself. So it might be just be you're moving to a new field. You're moving from a for-profit to a not-for-profit, a for-profit to a not-for-profit. So if you're, you know, in sales or marketing, it could be a fundraising job. If you're a great project manager, that certainly lends itself to the nonprofit arena. There's lots of ways to take these skills you've built up in the corporate world and move them into the nonprofit sector. And again, it's adding the coursework a little at a time. When Betsy Worley was interested in moving from Morgan Stanley and her law background, she didn't just, she reached out to, you know, the association she was involved with, and she talked to people there. It was a women's group, but she also went back to NYU and she took classes in nonprofit management and nonprofit online activities online that you would do for fundraising on nonprofit, all kinds of different coursework that you could take piecemeal so that she could get a feel for what that might mean. And that's a big transition often, to go from a for-profit to a non-for-profit. And at certain ages, that's something that really resonates with folks. And it's a different, it's often a different way of working. So you need to be psychologically prepared that things may move a little bit slower. There may be different demands on you. And again, so it's sort of really looking at what it is you're looking for in that job. And so I love to think about career transition as something that, you know, a lot of people, when we talked about this idea that it's a process, it's also, you know, it depends on where you are in your career, but it's often something that it's not linear. Like our primary careers, when we first get out of school and we get started on our path, is very much linear. You're moving up along the ranks. When you start shifting off into new directions, I honestly think it's a wonderful time in our lives. And often younger workers today are more nimble than we. I'm in my late 50s. And so for me, it was never, I did job hunting, but I did job jumping. But I did job jumping to get my salary up more than anything. Today, I think there's a lot more transition between careers at an earlier stage in life. But when you make a career transition, nothing is forever. Look at it like a patchwork quilt. You might be doing this for a while and this for a while. You might do a couple of different things at once, depending on where you are. This is a time to try out some different things if you have that financial fitness and that ability to do so. When I went back, when I wrote What's Next, as I mentioned, I traveled around the country and I met some amazing stories of people, you know, a patent attorney who, you know, started raising cattle, and, you know, someone who went from Microsoft to starting a water business. And they were just wonderful transition stories. But when I went back to visit these individuals a number of years later when I updated that book, and about a third of them had moved on to doing different things. So again, it was, or they may be doing a couple of different things. One woman who I profiled had been Oh my gosh, she was amazing. Jill Angel is amazing. She was a California Highway Patrol officer, and she transitioned to being a Nashville music agent. I mean, talk about a career transition. And you know, after a number of years, she's still dabbling and doing that, and is certainly an interest for her. But she also is a senior fitness trainer, because you know that was an area that interested her. So there's ways to slice and dice it that doesn't make it an all or nothing decision. I think a lot of reasons why we resist taking that first step to making a career transition is fear. You know, we're afraid that once we start down that path, we're stuck and we can't get back. Or it's not true. There's lots of ways you're going to weave as you go down this path, and it's important to realize that you can be nimble. That you have the opportunity to try lots of different things. One woman who she's now become a good friend of mine, but she was a corporate lawyer. She took an early retirement package. She was a lobbyist. She did all sorts of things on Capitol Hill. She had a really high power job. And what she loved to do, her passion was gardening. And so she decided that she was going to transition to becoming a landscape designer. And to her, this was just going to be amazing. She got a business card made. That's what she was going to do. But when she got into the garden and it became her full-time job, and this is why I talk about how it's so important to apprentice and volunteer and moonlight, she was absolutely miserable. And the reason why she was so miserable is because gardening for her had been her respite. That was where she went to get away from her crazy life. That was her place of peace and quiet. And when it became her full-time job, she was so lonely, because in fact, she was really a people person. And so that losing that sense of engagement with the world and being with others working, she quickly realized that this was not meant to be. And she, you know, got out of that and moved in another direction. So, you know, it's important to not ruin your hobby. I mean, I think for some people, I have a new book coming out called Never Too Old to Get Rich. And I have a whole section on starting a business from your passion or your hobby. So it can work, but I caution people to be, you know, really be sure that your hobby is something that you want to do on a daily basis. And it's something that really is going to be part of who you are. I have some resources, and I want to, you know, mention there's lots of great books out there that talk about career transition. I've certainly been focused on this area for a long time, because I think work is not a four-letter word. Work is something that should be engaging and that we love, that we want to do. And by all means, our time on, you know, here on this earth is never long enough. So truthfully, you want to be doing something that really gets you up in the morning. And so again, there's some great resources out there. And one of my favorites is a Dookie herself, Sanyan Sayang, who has the launch book. And I know she's doing a whole thing for the Duke Alumni Association also. Sanyan's book, the launch book, is fantastic. If you're interested in entrepreneurship or making career transitions and big change, and you know, a change in your career, I highly recommend it. It's just fantastic. In my new book, I talked to Sanyan a lot about her advice for entrepreneurs. And so I really encourage that. Encore.org is a group that, if you're thinking of moving into the nonprofit area, is really worth checking out for some of their stories of people who have made these successful transitions. And Marcy Albaher's book, The Encore Career Handbook, is great. And she's got lots of, you know, exercises in there that kind of help you work through figuring out what it is that you really want to do, that is who you are. And so those are some things. And I kind of was thinking maybe at this point we might open it up to some questions. If there's some out there that Susan, that have come in that folks would like to ask me, we can move in whatever direction you all want to go in. Susan? There's my new book. Do we have any questions out there? I would say, since Susan's not getting on, I would just, you know, go back and think about, you know, really doing, you know, start what we talked about back at the beginning about soul searching.
Hi, Kerry. Sorry, I had a technical difficulty. We've got some great questions coming. The first one is, what if you are so burned out that you kind of want to coast to retirement? How can you convince someone to hire you in a lower level role when you have a lot of experience?
Oh, that is a fantastic question, because that is so true, because employers often think, if you're overqualified for something, that, you're not going to be happy, that you're going to be miserable doing the job. And they also might think that you want, it's a salary issue. They think that you might want to be paid more than that. You're perfectly okay, with that. So this is a process where you really have to pull on those communication skills and tell people that, yeah, you're okay with that. This is, you want to step back. And I do find that retirement, in the way retirement today, it's not the way retirement was when, for our parents in many ways. I mean, I think, we have these different pockets of our retirement plan. We have our retirement savings and Social Security and maybe a pension, our outside savings, but working in some fashion has become a pillar of a retirement plan. And even people who have saved really adequately for retirement find that working is, it's sort of a safety net. And so most of us, even if you want to take that early retirement, like you talked about, and coast a little bit down the road towards a full retirement, you do want to stay engaged. You want to stay, I mean, the reasons for continuing to work are, so incredible. It's not just about the money, because if you are continuing to earn, you don't have to dip into those retirement accounts too early. You can keep adding to retirement accounts. You can push back taking Social Security, which we know can give you that 8% a year annual bump if you can stave off to 70 doing that. But it's mentally good for you. Use it or lose it. You keep your brain cells moving. And it's physically, the studies have shown that work physically is good for us, because we have this social network. We have we're getting out and we're doing things. And so it's just really rewarding to continue to work. So, but this issue of actually communicating to somebody, you just have to be honest. You have to tell your story, explain what it is that you're looking for, but you want to be part of the team. Employers don't want you there to be just as a placeholder for you for retirement. They want to hire somebody who's going to solve their problem now. So you need to cherry pick what it is about that employer who you can solve their problem. And maybe it's on a contract basis, maybe it's on a part-time basis. So you work with them on those levels that you're bringing it your full, you're coming full throttle at this, but it's just for this period of time.
Great, thank you. Holly is asking, how do you make space for the necessary steps for growth to make the transition change when your current job is very draining and time consuming? Any tips for this kind of situation?
Oh my gosh, that is so true, because, when we're talking about that, that's why, we often hit this burnout phase and it's like, I'm stuck. I feel trapped. I can't move forward. I know I might want to do something different. I want to, especially as we get a little bit older, one of the things we look for is autonomy. We want flexibility in our work. We want to have, time to feel like we're in control, that even if you're not an entrepreneur, but you feel like you're the boss, that you're not just running down the road, just putting fire after fire out and not having any personal space or time. And to make that career transition, Holly's, you're absolutely right. I mean, we need that space to be able to dream a little. My dad used to always say you have to dream to get there. And if you're so mentally overworked that you don't have that space in your life to play with some ideas, to dream, to do that stuff I talked about, volunteering, job shadowing somebody, how can you possibly do that? So, it's a tough one, and one, it sounds fairly simplistic, but if you can carve out even time at the end of the day to keep a journal and try to think of things that, give yourself just a little space to jot down ideas that during the day came to you, that is something you might want to explore, or, work on different things that engaged you. Try to remember things that usually we find something that we like during the day at our job, that something that can lighten it so you're not so unhappy where you are, because often we need to re-engage in our current job in order to have that energy to move forward with a positive attitude to a career transition that we can build out on the side. It's wonderful if you can get some sort of a sabbatical from your job, or use a period to step away briefly in order to focus on what something you might want to do. But this is easier said than done. So I'm not saying that's a simple solution, but I do find journaling is one way that we can escape a little bit. I also recommend doing a vision board. And again, you could do it on your computer. You could do a real one where you take time on the, if you have an hour or so, just cut out things or put up pictures of things that motivate you, of something that you might want to go to. And even if it's a visual reminder, when you're bogged down at what you're doing, you can look up and take a few minutes to go, okay, close your eyes and think about what it is that inspires you, that you want to work towards. And I think these are going to take, it takes time, but you can find ways to carve out just those brief moments to back away. And this is, again, doesn't directly relate to career transition. And there's a lot of buzz about this now too, but I find that when people are really unhappy in their work, it's often that they are bored. They're bored in some way, or they're feeling overwhelmed with their work environment. So if you can declutter your office in some way, what happens is you start to make decisions about your life. You value this, you don't value this. It's a really basic exercise, but it frees you up to a certain extent where you get unstuck and you start thinking of ways that you can move forward. And those are really key. And if you can, again, we talked about volunteering. If you can carve a little time to get out of your head and your current work into another world, and then you might get reignited with an idea of something that might get you fired up about making a transition.
Thanks, Kerry. I have two questions that are a little bit related. Samantha is asking about transitioning from being a full-time stay-at-home role into a new career. And then Kathleen, I think it's a little bit related. She's asking about transitioning from doing unpaid work, such as volunteering, to returning to paid work.
Those are great questions. And for women, these are really important things to pay attention to. I'm going to talk first about the idea of transitioning from doing work that you weren't paid for to work that you want to be paid for, or you will be paid for. You need to, and again, this can be, caregiving is huge in this area too, not only for children, but for aging parents or relatives. So if you've had to step out of the workforce for these reasons, you need to take a look at what were some of the things that you were doing in that role, and how can you reframe them in business terms? Maybe you were a financial manager, you were handling bill paying, you were hiring people to handle certain jobs, you were a project manager, you had a team of people working. If it was in a caregiving situation, you may have been a patient advocate, going to doctor's appointments and stuff. You may have, if you were working with your child's school in some way, you may have been fundraising. And so there's lots of ways. Think of what those jobs were, those volunteer jobs, and how they can be reframed in business language. And when you put them on your resume and on your LinkedIn is fantastic. Not only is it helping you to reach out to a network who may be working in fields that interest you, and we know our alumni networks are built-in supporters for us. So if you can find those folks, but the LinkedIn, actually your profile, you have a space to talk about your volunteer work, and play it up because employers and often find that volunteer experience, they value it as much as they do, paid experience. If you, frame it that you're using a skill, a specific skill that could be reapplied. In fact, I know someone who, was recently applying for a job, and on her LinkedIn profile, she had this thing about she had done a lot of volunteer work with animal groups and animal rescue groups. And the person who was hiring for this job has a real affinity for animal causes. And she came down to two candidates. She went with the woman who volunteered for the organization. So again, it's one way to play up that. And if also on LinkedIn, when you're going for an interview, you can find out by looking, if you know who's interviewing you, what causes they are involved with and what they care about, and you might be able to find that touching point, that point where you have in common that you can play up in an interview process. The issue of going from a work-at-home mom, I think that was the first question, Susan, was that it, to going back to the workplace?
Yes.
Yeah, so here, this is a unique challenge. I try to encourage women who have been stepped off the path to, during that time, to be doing some kind of consulting work if possible. But it's not always possible to keep your hand in some respect. But the most important thing you can do is to add the necessary skills. If you need to go back and take some classes, get a certificate, do it. Don't wait until you're just starting to, apply for jobs. It's really important to take that time to think about what it is you want to do. We talked about that soul searching, targeting companies where you might want to work, finding where you have connections at that company. Employers hire people the old-fashioned way. As many of online job boards there are, the point is people, they hire people they know or people they know. It's always been that way, but it's truthfully is that human contact that you can make at a company. So if you can take that time, find out those things, and then what is the job that you're interested in doing? And then look, this is where you can use those job boards. Go to, Indeed and some of those job boards and say, okay, here's a position I'm interested in. These are the skills that are required for that position. Do you have those? If not, step it up, go and take a class or two or do whatever you can so that you go in and say, yeah, I did take this time, but this is what I've been doing. And that will help you get down the road. But again, getting back into the workplace will often, and I honestly feel this way, it depends on that human connection. If you can find somebody who can open that door to get you in for that interview, you're more than likely be able to be, that will open up that opportunity for you. It might not be, happen right away. And so give yourself time to make that process. And you might want to, for example, there's a wonderful group here in Washington, D.C. called Flex Professionals. And they were started by 3 women who were they were at-home moms. They, wanted to get back into the workforce. They had really great jobs beforehand. They were having trouble finding jobs that, were even relevant for them at all, considering their educational background and their prior professional work. So they started this job, sort of an agency, a temporary agency in a way, but it's contract jobs. They're good paying jobs. They're often with nonprofits or small businesses or startups who need professionals to sort of helicopter in for contract assignments. And so starting back, if you've been out for a while in a contract position like that, is really a nice way. There are other groups out there like this. That one just came to mind right away. But again, look around in your community, but see if there's a way that there is maybe a job board like that does offer that connection for women.
Thank you, Kerry. I think we're going to have time for one or two more questions. So this one is for recent grads. This person is asking, I think it's really difficult to know what to do next and know what you like to do. We went through the motions, got a good education, and went to the best companies, etc. Now we're at a point where we need to make our own path, and it's difficult when you're not really sure where the next step will take you, where you want to go, or how to leverage the skills you have. What do you advise?
Oh gosh, I love that. It harkens back to I was giving a talk in New York once, and it was mostly to people, career transition folks over the age of 50. And my nephew, who he actually graduated from Lehigh, but he was, a few years into his career, but all the things I was talking about, career transition and finding meaning in your work and so forth, Brendan's like, Kerry, that's exactly what I want, and I was like, I get it. It's not defined by what decade you're in, but really defined by your own curiosity and your own creativity. And career transition is so energizing and exciting, but it's also scary if you don't know exactly. And that's the thing is there's no ideal starting point. We all think, oh, I have to have everything organized before I head off on this path. I say resist that. There's no ideal starting point. You may have to try a number of different things. And if you're young, you have that opportunity, truthfully. If you're financially fit and you don't have a lot of debt hanging over your head, you have the ability to be a bit nimble. Again, you have to make sure you have skills. You have something that you can sell, that you can solve. I talked about earlier, an employer's problem. It's never about you, it's about them. So you have to be able to position yourself to be a problem solver, whatever industry it is, whatever employer it is. And so I guess the root of it is, where do you think you'd like to apply those skills? And so that takes that soul searching and not being afraid to pick up the phone and make that phone call to somebody doing a job that you think is interesting, that wouldn't mind having, just like to stop by and have an informational interview or a cup of coffee, and always say to somebody, who else should I talk to? Who else should I talk to? Because it's a search. We all sort of, it's a quest to find out what really is going to resonate. And again, we talked about nothing is forever. So don't be so stuck in that, when we come out of college, we're also so programmed that you got to go, you got to do this, you got to do that. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way, but you never can stop learning. And so lifelong learning, it didn't stop just when you graduated from Duke. It continues every day. You need to be constantly pushing that envelope so you have value in what it is. And so I often find in your situation, doing volunteer work, maybe I'm harping on that a lot, but I do find that when you're working in the community and you're giving back and you're learning different, you can use your skill sets in lots of different avenues there. You might find something just hits you. I mean, that it's like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. So leave yourself that opportunity to do that and volunteering in your community or whatever it is. And always ask people, reach out what they do. People love to talk about their jobs, and it might spark an idea for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kerry. I think that's all the questions we have time for today. If you could just go ahead to the final slide, the one more, the Duke slide.
Wait, never too old to get rich. No, there we go.
We'll go back to that slide.
No, okay. Yep.
Just before we go, I just want the Duke Alumni Association has so many incredible career resources for you. If you haven't checked them out, they're all on our website, alumni.duke.edu. If you click on if you click on the benefits, you'll see under there most of our career resources. We have a professional development newsletter that goes out every other month and highlights incredible resources from around Duke. We have a job and internship board, and all of the positions there are listed exclusively by Duke alumni and parents who are willing to serve as a resource and a contact for Duke people at that company or for that position. We have regional events around the country and around the world. Many of them are career and networking focused. We have a network of alumni career coaches who can help you think through your career transitions. And then we have lots of different groups on our network. We have industry groups, we have affinity groups, in different ways you can use the alumni network to connect to different people who might help you think through your career. And most important, when you're on that site, alumni.duke.edu, sign in and update your profile so people can find you, and so you can network and connect with other Duke people, and you can connect with the Alumni Association, and we can support you with all of your career needs. Kerry, you want to flip back to your slide?
Sure. Did we get this one? I want to make sure everybody knows that. And never too old. So that's for any, this book, one section of this book that some of you might find interesting, depending on I have a whole section on people who start companies where an older entrepreneur was somebody who's younger, because I think 20-somethings have just as hard a time finding jobs as those over 50. There's often ageism works both ways. And when these two pair up, it's an incredible opportunity for entrepreneurship, for businesses that can really have traction and get the best of both generations of the experience and maybe the networking and the capital and the enthusiasm, the tech skills, the creativity of someone who's younger and just coming out of the job force. And so I think that are entering the job market. And so I just think it sort of is a fun bunch of profiles, but I think they're inspiring for anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur.
Thank you so much, Kerry, and thanks you to all of you for being with us here today. We hope you enjoyed. We'll be sending out later today or by early next week a link to the recording, a copy of Kerry's PowerPoint, and also links to the recordings of the 2 previous alumni webinars from the past couple months. That's it for us. We hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.